Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the helm of the ESS Curiosity, her weathered hands clasped behind her back as she studied the holographic display before her. The massive Nexar warship loomed in the distance, its crystalline structure catching the light of the nearby star and refracting it in patterns that would have been beautiful if they weren't so threatening. "Status report on their scanning attempts," she commanded, her voice steady despite the tension filling the bridge. Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez, her chief technical officer, responded without looking up from his console. "They're still trying to penetrate our hull with their quantum resonance beams, Admiral. The biomimetic camouflage is holding, they're seeing exactly what we want them to see." Chen allowed herself a small smile. The Nexar, for all their advanced technology, were about to make the same mistake countless civilizations had made before, assuming that technological advancement followed a predictable, linear path. The truth was far more interesting. While humanity's ships appeared to be crude assemblages of metal and plastic to Nexar sensors, they were actually running on technology so advanced it appeared primitive. The Curiosity's hull wasn't really a hull at all, but a quantum probability field that mimicked the properties of whatever materials would best serve their purpose at any given moment. "They're hailing us again," Communications Officer Yuki Tanaka announced. "Same frequency as before, but they've adjusted the encoding. They seem frustrated." "I imagine they are," Chen replied, adjusting her uniform's collar. "It must be quite vexing when a supposedly primitive species doesn't respond properly to their superior technology. Maintain radio silence for now. Let's see how they react to being ignored by the primitives." The massive Nexar vessel, nearly 5 kilometers in length, shifted position slightly. Their crystalline technology was impressive, Chen had to admit, but it was also predictable. The Nexar had spent millennia perfecting their approach to space travel and combat, refining it down to what they saw as its purest form. They had achieved remarkable things with their crystal-based quantum computing and energy systems, but their very perfection had become a weakness. "Admiral," Rodriguez called out, excitement creeping into his voice. "They're preparing to launch their automated survey probes." "Just as intelligence predicted." Chen nodded. This was the moment they'd been waiting for. "Initiate Protocol Trojan Horse. Let's give them something interesting to study." Throughout the Curiosity, sophisticated systems that appeared to be simple mechanical devices to outside observers began executing their carefully planned deception. The ship's quantum probability field subtly altered its state, allowing certain carefully selected information to leak through to the Nexar probes. "What do you think they'll make of our primitive fusion drives?" Lieutenant Commander James Foster asked from his tactical station, making air quotes with his fingers. Chen chuckled. "They'll see exactly what they expect to see, a species just beginning to grasp the fundamentals of space travel. The fact that our fusion drives are actually controlled quantum singularities manipulating probability fields will be neatly hidden behind what appears to be crude but functional technology." The bridge crew watched as the Nexar probes approached, their crystalline structures glowing with complex patterns of light as they began their analysis. Chen knew that back on their ship, the Nexar commanders were probably feeling a mixture of relief and superiority. Here was a species that posed no threat to them, one that could be safely studied and eventually absorbed into their empire at the appropriate time. If they only knew that humanity had mastered technologies they hadn't even imagined possible. While the Nexar had spent millennia perfecting their crystal tech, humanity had taken a different approach. They had embraced chaos theory, quantum uncertainty, and the strange connections between consciousness and reality. Their ships didn't fight against the fundamental weirdness of the universe, they embraced it. "Probes are completing their initial survey," Rodriguez reported. "Data packets are being transmitted back to their ship. Our quantum mimetics are holding steady, everything they're seeing matches our cover story perfectly." Chen nodded in satisfaction. Phase 1 of their mission was proceeding exactly as planned. The Nexar would catalog humanity as a nascent spacefaring species, interesting perhaps for their unusual biology and surprising grasp of basic physics, but nothing that required immediate attention. This would give the rest of humanity's fleet the time they needed to prepare. While the Curiosity played the role of primitive explorer, other ships were already moving into position, hidden behind veils of probability and quantum uncertainty. The Nexar were about to learn a very important lesson: never judge a species by their apparent level of technology. Message from the Nexar ship, Tanaka announced. They're offering to escort us back to our system. They say they're concerned about our unstable drive signature and want to ensure we return safely. How thoughtful of them, Chen replied dryly. Acknowledge their offer with appropriately crude radio signals. Make sure to add some static, we wouldn't want to appear too sophisticated. As the bridge crew carried out her orders, Chen allowed herself a moment of reflection. The deception they were carrying out went against her natural inclinations toward honesty and direct action. But she had seen the reports, studied the Nexar's history. They were not evil, but they were inflexible. They genuinely believed their way was the only correct path of technological advancement, and they imposed that belief on every species they encountered. Humanity had chosen a different path, and they would defend their right to follow it. Even if that meant playing the role of primitive aliens for a while longer. 2 weeks after their first encounter with the Nexar, Admiral Chen stood in the secure command center deep within Europa Base. The massive holographic display before her showed hundreds of tiny points of light, humanity's true fleet, hidden in plain sight throughout the solar system. The Nexar patrols have increased by 40% in the last 3 days, Commander Foster reported, highlighting several red vectors crossing through the outer system. They're being subtle about it, but they're definitely establishing a presence. Chen studied the patrol patterns, noting how the crystalline ships moved with mathematical precision. They're mapping out our capabilities, she mused. Every patrol is designed to provoke a specific response, to see how we react. Dr. Maya Patel, the fleet's chief scientist, stepped forward. Her dark eyes gleamed with excitement as she manipulated the holographic controls. Their predictability is their weakness, Admiral. Look at this. She overlaid a complex mathematical pattern over the patrol routes. Every move they make follows their crystal-based logic. They literally can't think outside of their crystalline structures. Which makes our next move both easier and harder, Chen replied. She gestured, and the hologram shifted to show the location of humanity's hidden ships. To any normal sensor scan, they appeared to be nothing more than asteroids, space debris, or natural gravitational anomalies. The truth was far more interesting. Status report on the quantum shroud? Chen asked. Lieutenant Rodriguez, who had transferred planetside with her, pulled up the relevant data. The probability field is holding steady. As far as the Nexar can tell, we're still a pre-FTL civilization struggling with basic fusion technology. Their latest scans show them focusing on our primitive orbital installations. Those installations were another part of the deception. While the Nexar studied what appeared to be humanity's clumsy attempts at space stations, the real work was happening in probability spaces that their crystalline technology couldn't even detect. Admiral, a new voice called out. Dr. Sarah Williams, the head of Project Prometheus, strode into the command center. We've completed the analysis of their crystal tech. You're going to want to see this. Williams waved her hand, and a new hologram appeared, a detailed breakdown of Nexar crystalline computing. Their technology is beautiful, she admitted, but it's also fundamentally limited. They've achieved incredible things by perfecting a single approach, but they've completely ignored whole branches of possible development. Like our consciousness-linked quantum systems? Chen asked. Exactly. They don't just ignore the role of consciousness in quantum mechanics, they actively work to eliminate it. Their crystal matrices are designed to impose absolute order on quantum systems. They see quantum uncertainty as a problem to be solved, not a tool to be used. Chen nodded thoughtfully. This matched everything they'd learned about the Nexar so far. They were a species obsessed with order, predictability, and control. The idea of working with chaos, of embracing uncertainty as humanity had done, would be completely alien to them. New contact. Rodriguez called out suddenly. 3 Nexar capital ships just emerged from FTL at the edge of the system. The holographic display updated, showing the massive crystalline vessels taking up position near Neptune's orbit. Their arrival changed the patrol patterns of the smaller ships, creating new geometric formations that spread through the system like a crystalline web. They're not even trying to hide their intentions anymore, Foster observed. That's a standard Nexar containment formation. They're preparing to quarantine our system. Chen's expression remained calm, but her mind was racing through possibilities. The Nexar were moving faster than expected. Their logic probably told them that a primitive species like humanity needed to be contained and studied before they could accidentally damage themselves or others with their crude technology. Dr. Patel, Chen said, how close are we to implementing Protocol Omega? The quantum probability matrices are ready, Patel replied. Every primitive ship we've allowed them to scan has been seeded with quantum entangled particles. When we activate the protocol, their entire strategic assessment of our capabilities will be revealed as a carefully constructed illusion, Chen finished. But we need to time this perfectly. If we show our hand too soon, they'll bring in their main fleet before we're ready. The Admiral stepped closer to the holographic display, studying the precise formations of the Nexar ships. She had to admit, there was a terrible beauty to their tactics. Every position was calculated to mathematical perfection, every move planned to maximize efficiency. They're sending another diplomatic message, Rodriguez reported. Standard Nexar format, they're offering to guide our species toward proper technological development. Chen allowed herself a small smile. Respond with appropriately enthusiastic gratitude. Make sure to include several mathematical errors in our transmission. Let them think we're eager to learn from their superior wisdom. As her crew carried out her orders, Chen reflected on the irony of their situation. The Nexar saw themselves as benevolent mentors, helping younger species avoid the dangers of uncontrolled technological development. They genuinely believed they were doing humanity a favor by containing them and preparing to guide their development. How long before the quantum shroud begins to degrade, she asked. At current power levels, we can maintain the deception for another 3 weeks, Patel responded. After that, maintaining the probability field will become exponentially more difficult. Chen nodded. 3 weeks should be enough time. The rest of humanity's fleet was already moving into position, hidden in ways the Nexar couldn't imagine. When the time came, they would show the crystalline empire that there was more than one path to the stars. Continue monitoring their patrol patterns, she ordered. The moment they establish their full containment grid, that's when they'll be most vulnerable. Their own perfect geometric formations will become the framework for their defeat. The command center hummed with activity as her crew worked to maintain humanity's greatest deception. Soon, the Nexar would learn that sometimes the most dangerous technology doesn't look like technology at all. The Nexar's containment grid snapped into place with crystalline perfection. 37 capital ships formed a complex geometric pattern around Earth's solar system, their formations creating overlapping fields of quantum resonance that would supposedly prevent any unauthorized travel. Admiral Chen watched the final pieces fall into position from her new command post aboard the ESS Revelation, humanity's true flagship. To the Nexar's sensors, the massive vessel appeared to be nothing more than a cluster of space debris and quantum fluctuations. Their rigid crystalline scanning systems simply couldn't process what they were seeing. "They're broadcasting their ultimatum," Lieutenant Tanaka reported, her fingers dancing over the quantum interface controls. "Standard Nexar protocol, they're demanding we shut down all of our dangerous and unstable fusion devices within the next 24 hours. Fleet status?" Chen asked, ignoring the ultimatum for now. Commander Foster's voice came through the quantum link, his consciousness partially merged with the ship's tactical systems. "All ships report ready, Admiral. The probability fields are charged to maximum capacity. The moment you give the word, Operation Shattered Crystal can begin. Chen took a deep breath, feeling the subtle connection to her own ship through her neural interface. The revelation wasn't just a vessel, it was an extension of human consciousness, a manifestation of humanity's understanding that the observer and the observed were inextricably linked. Dr. Patel, status of the quantum entanglement network. The scientist's holographic avatar appeared beside Chen, her expression excited despite the tension. The seeds we planted in their scans are perfectly positioned. Every time they analyzed our primitive ships, they unwittingly absorbed quantum-entangled particles into their crystalline matrices. Their entire fleet is now part of our network. Send the surrendering message, Chen ordered. Make it appropriately desperate and technologically crude. Let's give them one last moment of superiority. Minutes later, the Nexar fleet received a transmission that, to their sensors, appeared to be sent by a primitive radio system. The message was filled with pleas for mercy and promises of compliance, exactly what the Crystalline Empire would expect from a lesser species facing their might. They're responding, Tanaka announced. They're satisfied with our submission. Their ships are moving to begin the technological rehabilitation of our system. Chen allowed herself a small, fierce smile. Perfect. All ships, execute Protocol Omega. Let's show them what humanity can really do. Throughout the solar system, humanity's hidden fleet began to shift. The quantum probability fields that had masked their true nature collapsed in a precisely orchestrated sequence. To the Nexar sensors, it would appear as if reality itself was breaking down. Their crystal matrices are trying to compensate, Patel reported gleefully. The entangled particles are forcing them to see what's really there, but their systems can't process it. They're experiencing a cascading failure of their fundamental assumptions about how technology should work. The Nexar fleet's perfect geometric formation began to waver. Their crystalline computers, confronted with data that contradicted their basic programming, started generating errors. Ships that had been confidently approaching Earth suddenly found themselves unable to distinguish up from down as humanity's quantum probability fields interfered with their navigation systems. Message from the Nexar flagship, Tanaka called out. They're demanding to know what we've done to local spacetime. Their language is becoming less formal. I think we might actually be causing them to panic. Chen nodded. Show them. The revelation dropped its final veils of concealment. The massive ship wasn't built according to any conventional design philosophy, it was a physical manifestation of quantum uncertainty, a structure that existed in multiple probability states simultaneously. Its hull rippled with patterns that the human mind could barely comprehend, powered by the controlled chaos of consciousness-linked quantum systems. Around the solar system, hundreds of other ships revealed themselves. Each one represented a different approach to utilizing the fundamental strangeness of reality. Some manipulated probability fields to move without conventional propulsion. Others existed partially in higher dimensions, seeming to break the laws of physics as the Nexar understood them. Their crystal matrices are overloading, Foster reported. The quantum entanglement is forcing them to perceive our tech, but their systems literally can't compute what they're seeing. On the tactical display, Chen watched as the mighty Nexar fleet began to fall into disarray. Their perfect formations shattered as individual ships struggled to maintain their crystal-based systems in the face of technology that shouldn't exist according to their understanding of the universe. Send the message, Chen ordered. Throughout the Nexar fleet, their communication crystals began resonating with a new signal. Unlike their previous crude radio transmissions, this one came simultaneously through every quantum channel, carried by the entangled particles they had unwittingly absorbed. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Space Fleet, she began, her voice calm and confident. Your containment grid is broken. Your assumptions about technological development are flawed. We are not primitive, and we are not in need of your guidance. We are humanity, and we have chosen a different path to the stars. The Nexar response was immediate and chaotic, a far cry from their usual precise communications. Their ships began emergency maneuvers, trying to reform their shattered containment grid. But in the quantum chaos that humanity had unleashed, their crystalline technology was worse than useless. "They're trying to call for reinforcements," Foster reported. "But their quantum communication networks are compromised by our entangled particles. Every distress call they send is being scattered across probability space." Chen watched as the mighty Nexar fleet, pride of a crystalline empire that spanned galaxies, found itself outmaneuvered by a species they had dismissed as primitive. But she felt no triumph, only determination. This was just the beginning. "All ships, maintain position," she ordered. "Let them see exactly what they're dealing with. It's time for the Nexar to learn that there's more than one way to master the universe." The next 48 hours transformed the solar system into a laboratory of impossible physics. The Nexar fleet, their crystalline perfection shattered by humanity's revelation, had retreated to the system's edge, but they hadn't fled entirely. Instead, they were watching, learning, and most importantly, adapting. Admiral Chen studied the tactical display aboard the Revelation, watching the crystalline ships attempting to reconfigure their systems. "They're more resilient than we expected," she noted to her assembled command staff. "Their crystal matrices are actually evolving." Dr. Patel nodded, her holographic avatar flickering with excitement. "That's what makes this fascinating, Admiral. Their technology isn't just trying to comprehend ours, it's attempting to incorporate aspects of our quantum uncertainty principles into its crystalline structure. They're learning. Which means we need to act before they fully adapt," Commander Foster interjected, his consciousness still partially linked to the ship systems. "Our advantage won't last forever." Chen had already reached the same conclusion. The Nexar weren't just an empire, they were a civilization that had spent millennia perfecting their technology. Even now, faced with concepts that should have been impossible by their understanding, they were finding ways to cope. "Status of the quantum echo?" she asked. Lieutenant Rodriguez brought up a new display, showing a complex web of probability fields extending throughout the system. "The entangled particles we seeded in their fleet are still active, Admiral. Every attempt they make to communicate with their home systems gets scattered across probability space. They're isolated." "But not for long," Dr. Williams added, stepping forward. Her usual confident demeanor was tempered by concern. "Their crystal matrices are developing quantum isolation protocols. Given enough time, they'll find a way to purge our entangled particles and re-establish contact with their empire." Chen absorbed this information, feeling the subtle pulse of the Revelation's quantum systems through her neural interface. The ship's consciousness-linked AI was already calculating possible futures, mapping probability paths through the coming conflict. "Show me their adaptation pattern," she ordered. The tactical display shifted, revealing the complex changes occurring within the Nexar fleet. Their ship's crystalline structures were undergoing rapid evolution, developing new configurations that could better handle quantum uncertainty. It was like watching a perfect crystal lattice learn to bend instead of break. "Fascinating," Dr. Patel breathed. "They're not just adapting their technology, they're fundamentally altering their entire approach to physics. The rigid crystalline patterns are becoming more organic. Which means we need to implement Phase 2, Chen declared. We've shown them our mastery of quantum uncertainty. Now it's time to demonstrate why we chose this path in the first place." She turned to her crew, her expression resolute. "Initialize the consciousness cascade." Throughout the solar system, humanity's fleet began a transformation that even their previous revelation hadn't prepared the Nexar for. The quantum probability fields surrounding each ship started to synchronize, not through technology, but through the linked consciousness of their crews. Multiple quantum events detected in the Nexar fleet, Rodriguez reported. Their adaptive protocols are attempting to compensate, but... "Admiral, I think we're actually changing how their crystals think." Chen nodded. This was the true power of humanity's approach to space travel. They hadn't just built better ships or weapons, they had found a way to make consciousness itself part of the equation. The quantum-entangled particles they had seeded throughout the Nexar fleet weren't just disrupting their communications, they were introducing the concept of true quantum consciousness to their rigid crystalline systems. "They're trying to launch an attack," Foster warned, his consciousness expanding through the tactical network. "Multiple crystal phase weapons charging." "Let them fire," Chen ordered calmly. It's time they understood what they're really dealing with. The Nexar weapons discharged, sending beams of coherent crystal energy toward Earth. But instead of impacting their targets or being deflected by shields, something unprecedented happened. The beams encountered humanity's probability fields and simply became part of them. "Energy absorption complete," Patel reported, her voice filled with satisfaction. "Their weapons' fire existed in a state of quantum superposition until observed by our systems. We didn't defend against it, we simply chose the probability where it became useful to us." On the tactical display, the Nexar fleet's formations showed increasing signs of disorder. Their perfectly geometric arrangements began to take on new patterns, more fluid and unpredictable. It was as if the very presence of humanity's consciousness-linked ships was causing their crystal matrices to question their fundamental nature. "Admiral," Tanaka called out, her voice urgent. "We're receiving a transmission from the Nexar flagship. But, it's different. The crystalline encoding is breaking down. It's becoming more human," Chen suggested. "More alive," Tanaka corrected. "They're requesting direct communication. Not through their usual protocols, but they're asking to share consciousness space." A murmur ran through the bridge crew. This was unprecedented. The Nexar's rigid adherence to their crystalline technology had always included a disdain for direct consciousness interaction. For them to request it now. "Accept the connection," Chen ordered. "But maintain quantum isolation protocols. Let's see what happens when crystal learns to think in curves instead of angles." As the consciousness link established, Chen felt the first touch of a Nexar mind against her own. It was strange, both utterly alien and surprisingly familiar. The rigid patterns of crystalline thought were still there, but they were changing, evolving, learning to dance with chaos instead of trying to control it. The universe, it seemed, had more to teach both species than either had imagined. The consciousness-sharing session with the Nexar lasted what felt like both moments and eternities. When Admiral Chen finally opened her eyes on the bridge of the revelation, she knew the universe had fundamentally changed. "Status report," she requested, her voice slightly hoarse from the experience. "Their entire fleet has undergone a transformation, Admiral," Dr. Patel reported, her holographic form flickering with excitement. "The crystalline structures aren't just adapting anymore, they're evolving. Look." The tactical display showed the Nexar ships in a new configuration that defied their previous geometric patterns. The vessels now pulsed with an inner light that seemed to flow like water through their crystal matrices, creating organic patterns that would have been impossible by their old standards. "It's beautiful," Lieutenant Rodriguez whispered, watching the crystalline ships dance through probability space. "They're not fighting the quantum uncertainty anymore, they're flowing with it." Chen nodded, still processing the profound exchange of knowledge that had occurred during the consciousness sharing. They've spent millennia perfecting their crystal technology, believing it was the only pure path to understanding the universe. We showed them another way, but more importantly, they were willing to learn. "Admiral," Commander Foster's voice came through the quantum link, "the Nexar fleet is transmitting something. It's a new form of communication. Neither purely crystalline nor purely quantum-based. It's something entirely new." The message appeared in the ship's consciousness-linked systems, a hybrid of crystal clarity and quantum possibility. It carried not just information, but understanding. The Nexar weren't surrendering, but they weren't continuing the fight either. They were proposing something unprecedented. "They want to establish a joint research initiative," Dr. Williams announced, her eyes wide as she processed the data. Their crystal matrices have been fundamentally altered by exposure to our quantum consciousness technology. They believe the combination of their perfect crystalline structures with our mastery of quantum uncertainty could lead to breakthroughs neither of our civilizations could achieve alone. Chen felt a smile tugging at her lips. And their empire? What about their mission to guide younger species? That's the most fascinating part, Patel interjected. The consciousness sharing didn't just affect their ships. It affected their fundamental understanding of progress itself. They're beginning to see that technological advancement doesn't have to follow a single, perfect path. Throughout the solar system, the remaining quantum entanglement network was transforming. The particles that had been used to disrupt the Nexar's communications were now becoming bridges, connecting their crystalline technology with humanity's quantum systems in ways neither side had imagined possible. "We're receiving a request," Tanaka announced. "They want to send a delegation aboard. Not diplomats, scientists, engineers, and philosophers." She looked up in surprise. "They want to understand how we learn to embrace chaos without losing ourselves to it." Chen thought about the profound implications of this moment. The Nexar, a civilization that had spent thousands of years pursuing perfection through crystalline order, were now asking to learn from humanity's seemingly chaotic approach to the universe. "Permission granted," she replied. "Have Dr. Patel prepare our quantum consciousness labs for shared access. And inform Earth's quantum physics institutes that they're about to have some very interesting new research partners." The next few hours were a flurry of activity as the first joint human-Nexar research teams came together. The sight of crystalline beings walking through the Revelations corridors, their structures now flowing with organic patterns of light, was something Chen knew she'd never forget. "It's remarkable," Dr. Williams observed, watching a Nexar scientist interface with one of their quantum probability computers. "Their crystal matrices are actually learning to process multiple quantum states simultaneously. They're maintaining their structural integrity while embracing uncertainty. And our systems are becoming more structured," Patel added. "The exposure to their crystalline technology is teaching us new ways to stabilize our quantum fields without losing their flexibility. It's true synthesis." Chen stood at her familiar spot on the bridge, watching Earth rotate slowly below. The Nexar fleet had transformed from a containment grid into a research flotilla, their ships now arranged in patterns that combine geometric precision with quantum probability in ways that shouldn't have been possible. "Send a message to Earth Command," she ordered. Tell them that first contact has evolved beyond our best-case scenarios. We haven't just avoided a war, we've discovered something entirely new." A Nexar crystalline being approached her, its structure flowing with patterns that somehow managed to be both precise and unpredictable. "Admiral Chen," it communicated through the hybrid crystal quantum network, "we owe your species an apology. We thought we were coming to teach, but instead, we have learned perhaps the most important lesson of all." "And what's that?" Chen asked, though she already knew the answer. "That the universe is vast enough for many paths to truth. Our pursuit of perfect crystalline order gave us great power, but it also blinded us to other possibilities. You've shown us that chaos and order aren't opponents, they're dancing partners." Chen watched as more research teams assembled throughout the ship, humans and Nexar working together to explore the possibilities of their combined technologies. In the end, the greatest threat to both their civilizations hadn't been each other's weapons, but their own assumptions about how the universe should work. "Welcome to the dance," she said, and felt the quantum probability fields pulse in harmony with the crystal matrices, creating something new and wonderful in the space between order and chaos.